We're not doing this just for some tech accomplishment, but we're doing it to solve the challenges of people and planet.
The thing that had been the AI test forever just went whooshing by.
We've increased the energy efficiency of computing by 10,000 times.
Today, we're launching GPT-5.
Gemini 3,
Llama 4,
Claude, Grok 4.
It's the worst it'll ever be.
All right.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Future Live. It is Friday, March 20th, 2026. I'm Matt Berman.
And I'm Nick Wentz.
And we just were absolutely blown away by that hype reel once again. I do love it.
We need more robots and more spaceships.
Yeah, absolutely. Today we have a great show. We have Jayden Clark, aka Atlas, aka Creatine Cycle, host of MOTS, members of the Technical Staff podcast. We have Andrew Wall, general manager of Azure Maia at Microsoft, to talk about chips. We have Shaw Walters, founder of Eliza Labs, to talk about everything agents. And last, Himanshu Tyagi, co-founder of Sentient. But first, I think we should talk about some of the news this week, and I think we should bring on our first guest to do so with us.
Yeah, Jayden, come on. Let's do this.
Hey, Jayden.
Hello. How we doing?
Doing well. Welcome back to the show.
I appreciate it. It's great to be here. I can't wait to read the news. You know, I think it's one thing that I always say. I think everybody should spend more time on their phone. I think it'll actually make them less anxious, the more informed that they are, right? So they should actually scroll until they feel okay about things. So I look forward to doing this with you guys here this morning.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jayden, we like to talk as in-depth as possible about some of these headlines, but maybe we should just read the headlines and just go headline by headline as quickly as possible to fit as much in, just add to that anxiety a little bit.
Well, you get the whole story from the headline.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. The headline is enough for me. Thank you. You know, like I'll go on with my day.
Right. Hey, you know, actually, before we get into headlines, Jayden, I'm hoping you can give us an update. San Francisco, culture, life, sciences, you know, what is happening on the streets?
What is happening on the streets? Goodness gracious. I think, you know, we're sort of in the attention is everything era. That's sort of this thing that you keep hearing about, right? It's like, you know, I think we touched on it a little bit last time that we were on, but basically the idea that, you know, because software is becoming much easier to build, right? I mean, whether people will call it, you know, the commodification of software or something like along those lines, basically becoming easier to build, and so everybody's sort of thinking about this big thing, distribution, right, or like getting attention, all of those sorts of things. And so it's sort of like this interest, this fine line between, you know, like a lot of startups are really starting to think about, okay, like how do I do the media thing, right? How do I do the media thing? How do I get the eyeballs on my product? How do I stand out, right? If I'm building a product that might be, you know, similar to somebody else's, of course, you know, I think probably what we'll touch on is like the amount of different open claws there might be now. And so like, how does one differentiate, you know, in a world of open claws? How does one differentiate in a world of AI agents? And so I think that is, I think it's top of mind for a lot of people, right? I mean, like obviously the whole new media thing definitely plays into this as well. And yep, you know, I think it's been a little while since we felt a massive step change in AI. So that anxiety feels like it's tapering off a little bit.
Jayden, what do you think What do you think about the Cluely approach to like rage bait new media? Is that sustainable or I mean, can you build a business on rage bait?
No. I think you need credibility first. I think virality only works if you have credibility, right? If you have an underlying product that one works and two is good. It's not to say, it's not to throw that much. I mean, as far as I know, I know people that used Cluely even in their first iteration, and they were relatively impressed with the product. But of course, they've gone ahead and pivoted, and the it just seems to often be the case that those that are focusing on the rage bait on the distribution, there's not always it's not always lined up with the quality of their product. I do think you need credibility first, and then you can do the virality second.
Nick, you are muted. We'll figure it out one day.
Yeah, we'll solve AGI before we solve video conferencing. This is just how it is,
is true.
It's not like we do this every week.
No, I don't even know how that happened. Jayden, I'm trying to think of some good examples myself of companies that are doing this well. There's so many different approaches to getting attention. We just talked about rage baiting as one of them.
Yes.
I think of Monday.com as like this company that just threw a bunch of money on like YouTube ads, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how effective that was for them, but you certainly used to see them everywhere at least.
Right.
And then, there's Anthropic as another example where they're almost taking this like anti-positioning approach to branding where, they make the confrontation, with the government, turn that into almost a positive. So they took a unique policy stance that their competitors weren't taking, and as a result, they actually got a lot of positive attention for it. Are there other examples that you think are worth mentioning here?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me think. I mean, I think just generally, I mean, if I I think the positive examples off the top of my head, it's sort of hard to think of. You mentioned like the YouTube ads, right? It does feel like that meta, right? YouTube ads, Facebook ads, Google ads, all of those sorts of things, they don't work as well as they once did, right?
Yeah.
And so, a lot of companies are sort of, well, I mean, there are company mandates for X. I actually think, now that I'm thinking out loud, I think Notion does a pretty decent job of this, right? I think their X presence has improved quite a bit. I think they're just posting some nice stuff. I mean, the Notion brand is pretty vanilla, and they're really doing their best to sort of brand away from sort of like note taking to this AI first. And I think if anybody's actually used the Notion agent, it's actually a pretty decent experience, right? It's like I remember. I tend to be one of those nerds that write a lot of their notes in like Apple Notes or Markdown files in Vim or something. But that's that's definitely the minority. But when it comes to Notion, I remember using it a few years ago. You kind of there was a bit of a learning curve, right? You would use Notion blocks. But since sort of seeing it on the timeline and seeing all of these demos, I remember going back into Notion a few months ago, and I was just able to use the Notion AI to do all these things. And I think they have a really, really nice way of just demonstrating their product. And again, it kind of goes back to the credibility point, right? It's like cool. Notion is a world-beating company. I think they just surpassed 600 mil ARR, and their AI product. It's quite intuitive, right? It's like I didn't have to relearn the Notion block because I could just get Notion AI to do it. And I found that out via their little demos.
Yeah, they've also done a good job leaning into kind of the community aspect of marketing. They have a really good marketplace where people are building their own templates and sharing those templates, and that has a positive effect on kind of their reach. And
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, though, it seems like Google is always going to be, or at least until SEO completely dies and SEM completely dies, is the winner. I think I Googled something about Claude the other day, and OpenAI ads, branded links showed up on top. So it's like, even in the face of all of this innovation and people calling for these kind of traditional channels to die, you're always going to bid on your competitors. It's the thing that never stops.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, well, let's jump into some stories. Alex, if you could share the screen. Thank you. All right, so GTC was this week, and it seemed like it was the week of OpenClaw. Yeah, what do you guys make of all of this? It seems like everything is becoming a derivative or a version of OpenClaw.
Yeah, I think so I went for the first day keynote. It was a lot of fun. I've seen Jensen do a keynote now like 3 times, and I mean he is a rock star. By the way, found out he did a 3 hour keynote. He has no teleprompter, none. He's doing this from memory, which is like, and all of the brand names around Nvidia are incredibly complicated, and he just gets them off and knows exactly what he's saying. I was so impressed by that. I just assumed he was using a teleprompter. But yeah, so very, very impressive. Obviously dedicated a huge portion of the keynote to talking about OpenClaw. Peter Steinberger was there. He was a mega celebrity at GTC, and yeah, now they announced Nemo Claw, and look, this all fits within the Nvidia strategy. They want more tokens being used. Agents use more tokens. It doesn't matter if you're going to Anthropic for your tokens, if you're going to OpenAI for your tokens, if you're running them locally. It does not matter. Nvidia gets paid on the whole stack. It's like it really made me realize 2 things. There's never enough tokens in the world, and every single one of them is coming from Nvidia.
The token king.
Yeah, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. Not investment advice.
Do you think he has one leather jacket or like a closet full of leather jackets?
A closet,
Oh,
for sure.
yeah, he's gotta have like at least 10 of the same one.
Yeah,
At
yeah, yeah.
least 10.
Like, you just like you find your fit, right? I mean, even the shirt that I'm wearing, right? I have about 10 of these same shirts, just
Really?
different colors. You find your fit, and then you just kind of run with it. I mean, I think it's a very like man thing to do. I think.
I think
But
Steve Jobs kind of
clearly got it.
trailblazed that, right?
Yeah.
Steve Jobs had the turtleneck, and then Zuckerberg kind of did the same thing for a while, although he's now branched out and got into the design world. But I agree. I think I need to buy more of these shirts.
Yes. Yeah. You gotta find your fit. Gotta find your cut. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so Jensen had a pretty good quote during this. I think it was during the keynote. It says the largest, most popular, the most successful open source project in the history of humanity, and this is surpassing 30 years of Linux growth in just a couple of weeks. So he seems to be fully on board with this. It's a good partnership because one of the main drawbacks and complaints about OpenClaw was the security. So it seems like NemoClaw is very focused on that aspect.
Yeah, you know what I also really like is I really got the vision for what NVIDIA's building. For a while, they were a GPU company, and then this is kind of all what he talked about. So, started as a GPU company, then they were kind of an inference company, and now they are an AI factory company. And so they're touching every part of the AI stack. And it's kind of crazy because they're now building CPUs, and they're building networking, and they're building storage, and it's like all of these things. And I think that's also why OpenClaw was so important to NVIDIA, because it really showed when you're using agents at production scale, you're obviously using a ton of tokens, but you're also reading and writing from databases a ton. And so and you're not reading and writing it from databases like a human would. You're doing so at like 10 or 100 times the volume that you would otherwise. So we need new networking solutions, new storage solutions, and of course, NVIDIA is there to sell them all to you. I thought that was just so impressive.
Yeah, and speaking of selling them all to you, Jensen had a pretty good forecast, 1 trillion by 2027 of the AI build out, essentially. And this is only including, I believe it's, oh man, well, it's probably only 2 of their products, Blackwell and Vera Rubin, if I'm remembering correctly. So that doesn't include what they're doing with Grok or other products.
Yeah,
So
that was
maybe that's
speaking
the
of
floor.
Grok, by the way, that's another thing that I was super impressed with. Like 2 months after the acquisition, they already integrated it into their product. That's pretty insane. I mean, if we're talking about a software product, that would be really fast, let alone a hardware product, right? So like they took the Grok LPU and they've already integrated it, and it's just, yeah, it was just super impressive.
Yeah, putting
Feels
that
like
20
2
billion
years.
to work.
Feels
Let's
like
talk
2 years ago.
Say
Yeah,
again?
exactly.
It
2 years
feels
ago
like
in
feels
AI
like
land.
feels like that happened 2 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
The
That was like
acquisition.
Christmas Eve, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 2 years
Um,
ago in AI world, exactly.
yeah, yeah. Can we talk about Jensen's quote where he said, "Your $500,000 a year engineer is going to need or should be spending 250,000 in
I did see
tokens."
that.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is good, Jayden. I want to get your thoughts on this. So like if your $500,000 a year engineer isn't burning at least $250,000 in tokens, something is wrong. What do you think?
Um, I just think like all great things, I think it just depends. And it's one of those really boring answers, right? It's like as far as I'm concerned, does the thing work? It's I feel like my engineering philosophy, not that I'm a podcaster now, so it's a rich thing for me to say. But basically, whenever I was building the thing, right? If AI, right? If using the tokens got me the result and got the thing working, then great. But there were times in which that was not the case. Do I attend? I think directionally, is he correct? Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we've kind of seen that with the step change, with Claude Opus 4.5 and Claude Code, the sort of the step change that everybody I think thinks about from November last year, and has really changed the way that we build software. But yeah, I think it's just like he's the token salesman. He wants you to use more tokens, kind of like what you were talking about, right? So the tokens are going to go. He's going to be selling the tokens no matter what you use. Makes sense for him to be saying stuff like this, I would say.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
I
Well,
I would actually say $250,000 in tokens is nothing. I really
Right.
think like the tokens are getting better, faster, and also more expensive. Like there are certainly a ton of tokens you can get that are less expensive, but you want the good tokens, right? As an engineer, if you're building and you're building complex systems, you want the best tokens and you want them as fast as possible. Like I am paying Opus 6 times for their fast tokens, 6 times more, I should say, for their fast tokens, 6 times more. But then I can, spin up multiple agents in parallel. And I,
Yep.
if I actually were an engineer, $250,000 would be easy. That would be easy for me to burn through.
Yep. That makes
Stealing
sense.
Jaden's line real quick, but I think it really depends. Like you can easily make an argument that cheaper is better for 95% of the use cases out there. If an engineer is coding, at the frontier, yes, you want the best models, but there's a lot of engineering use cases where the cheaper might be better because you're just going to get more production out of it.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. There's there are certainly a lot of use cases that can be done with local models, with cheaper models. But like when you're talking about experimentation, when you're talking about wanting to move fast, and especially for engineers who are building really cool stuff, I think like cost is a afterthought for them for the most part. I don't think that's going to be the case forever though. I really think we're going to start to see more of the hybrid approach where, frontier models for the stuff that you have to use them for, kind of middle of the road sonnet workhorse models for the majority, and then once you productionize a system, using local models to actually run them, even fine tuning them to get really good at that one narrow use case. That's going to be probably the approach. I don't think everybody's just going to be okay with spending millions of dollars per engineer per year on tokens forever. At a certain point, model routing is going to become much more important, and it's just not as important in this moment. But for enterprise, for scaling up, it certainly will be.
Yeah. I made that comment being the person who's using 4.6 to like build front end systems like websites, which just made me completely
HTML.
unnecessary. Yeah, good old HTML.
Yeah, well,
Jaden,
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
that I think I'm using like 5.2 to build like little vibe coded like tools to help me. So I've kind of gone the other way, right? I've used the less expensive models to do the same thing. Well, not
Why
the same
why
thing, but
why did
similar.
you choose 5.2?
I mean, honestly, it was probably the one that was just defaulted, and I didn't look. But
Yeah.
but it got me some way of it got me somewhat of the way there. So yeah, I think Yeah, and it's also for me. I feel like a lot of when I build these personal tooling, a lot of it's just an excuse for me to keep up with the tools and to keep my mind sharp. It's like I was like building like a little clipper, right? To just try and help my workflow. And do I really need a clipper for my show personally? Not really. I feel like I have a pretty good handle on it, but if it gives me an excuse to actually keep up with the tools, right, and have continue to be plugged into the engineering ecosystem, then I'll absolutely do that.
As a full-time podcaster, do you like, I know you said maybe the Clipper stuff you don't need, but are there workflows, are there automations that you think you would build?
So there's one thing that I really want to build, and it's actually not necessarily it's not that adjacent to my workflow, but it's adjacent to tweeting, which I do a lot.
Yeah, you do. You do.
Basically, I would love to build like a little whether it's like an iOS plugin or something like that to essentially like index memes on my phone. I find that like I want to reply to somebody using a particular meme, and I know that I've saved it somewhere. I know that I've saved it, and so what could I do? I could go and Google the meme and save it for the 5th time, use up a bunch of my disk space, or I could try and use Apple Search, but Apple Search kind of sucks. It's not, I'm not going to be able to look up Giga Chad, using Apple Search. Like I'd have to, use like, the word man or something. And so just being able to search for memes, that would actually save me a bunch of time. So not necessarily like a personal automation, but that'd be something that I'd love to build.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I know like it's kind of a slightly a joke, but actually a real use case. I do something very similar. Rather than memes, I'm just like any articles that I come across, any videos that I come across, I throw them into this like big bucket embedded database, and I can always search across it. It's kind of the same functionality, but instead of articles, you just throw memes in there, and it embeds it, and it kind of understands what the image is, and you can search against it. I think that would be actually really cool.
Yeah. So that's what I, when I have a spare second, that's what I intend to build. It would save me a bunch of time. I spend a not insignificant amount of time scrolling through my camera roll, just trying not to use up more disk space, because I could save it for the 5th time, but I don't know. I like my disk space.
Let's go to the next story.
Yeah, what do we got here? So this is actually interesting. Jensen called out every CEO actually who's been firing people with the excuse of AI. So let me actually read this, and then we can talk about it. So Jim Cramer asked him why companies are laying people off if AI is supposed to make everyone more productive. Jensen answers by saying, for companies with imagination, you'll do more with more. For companies where the leadership is just out of ideas, they have nothing else to do. They have no reason to imagine greater than they are. When they have more capability, they don't do more. I mean, I think he hit the nail on the head here. Like this checks out to me. What do you guys think?
Jayden, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's exactly right. I mean, I had a conversation, it was a few weeks ago now, with Sam Lambert from Planet Scale, and he basically said, if you have, we were talking about just hiring engineers, and sort of addressing the sort of the AI anxiety within SF. But basically, what he said was that if you have engineers that are more productive because of AI, then you want more engineers. That's basically what he said. I think the prime example of this sort of like AI layoff thing is obviously Jack Dorsey's Block. I think that was like the big headline a couple of weeks ago now, where he laid off over 40% of his workforce, and he had the whole tweet in which he was talking about advances in AI and essentially that being the reasoning. But if you look deeper into Block, I think they sort of quadrupled their headcount between 2019 and 2022. Of course, their revenue was growing significantly during that time, and of course we had, I mean, I think we probably all remember the whether we call it bloat or something else, but I might call it a hiring bloat of the 2010s, especially into 2021, that ZERP era. But basically, since 2022, I mean, you could check Block's stock price, right? Down 80% since the peak, right? And as far as I know, their revenue growth had completely flatlined. And so I think balance sheets are going to explain a lot more than sort of this AI narrative. And I do think it's actually it's damaging to the technology, right? I mean, if we're already getting to this point in which CEOs feel comfortable blaming AI on mass layoffs, that is not good for AI. I mean, that's a very, very unpopular position. I mean, it's I think we're already kind of fighting an uphill battle when it comes to AI messaging and those sorts of things. If we get company CEOs using it as an excuse, like I think Jack Dorsey did, we might be in trouble. Going forward with whether it be regulation or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I mean, it gives oxygen to this narrative of white collar bloodbath and the anxiety that so many people are feeling. I totally agree. I think Aaron Levy, made a really good point when we talked to him last year, and that was at Box, the teams that are using AI and becoming more productive as a result of their usage, he's actually resourcing those teams more. He's hiring more on those teams. It's a more and more situation.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That literally, I was thinking the same reference, and that he was very early on that thinking.
So early.
But then, look, AI is a nice convenient scapegoat when you need to pare down your workforce from exactly what you said, Jayden, like the ZERP era of overhiring, and then you look at the stock price, and yes, everybody's getting more done because of artificial intelligence, but at the same time, as Jensen says, you can do so much more. Let me tell you something. I am automating so many parts of my life, so many parts of my business, and I am so busy. I am busier than ever. And it's such a weird feeling because I'm getting so much done, but I feel so far behind, and we're hiring. And then you get like the weird, awkward Bernie Sanders videos calling out. So like, it's just like, it's frustrating when we like the folks on the inside can look at the Jack Dorsey like them kind of cutting 40% of the workforce, blaming it on artificial intelligence. We know that's not necessarily the full picture. Of course, it's I'm sure part of it, but it just makes AI look bad and continues the negative sentiment and the negative perception towards AI, which is already bad in the US. 20% favorability towards AI in the US, whereas in China it's 80% favorability towards AI. Like that this is a major issue that hopefully us talking about it in a positive and optimistic way will help.
Totally. Yeah, there was a NBC News poll, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, that actually put AI less popular than ICE. Right, and it's like, not to get political about it, but it's like,
that's saying something.
Like, how did this happen? How did this happen? I mean, regardless of what you think of the politics of it, that seems kind of insane. It seems kind of insane for a technology that many people use on a day-to-day basis. many people.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. And well, if you think AI is unpopular, how about the metaverse? Man. How about that segue too?
That segue. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, this is
that's a lot of zeros.
It's a lot of zeros. It could be more zeros, but it sounds like they're officially shutting it down.
Can I be honest? I didn't I thought 80 billion was like kind of low for the amount of investment and the visibility that the metaverse had. From Meta alone, 80 billion. I was like, oh, okay, that's not so bad. But I mean, I know that's a lot of money, but anyways, it's I guess it's in writing now. Like it's they're throwing in the towel.
Yeah, I mean they changed their whole name. It's like
what do they do now?
They change it back.
This was their identity for a while, wasn't it? Like
absolutely.
Yeah. So the most expensive tech pivot in history. Or maybe not. I don't know. We should look it up.
So what do we think, Jayden? Let me get your thoughts on this. Do you think this is them officially throwing in the towel? Do you think the metaverse, AR, VR has a place? Like obviously, Apple Vision Pro was a big flop. I think the tech is really cool. There's just something about, at least for me, putting on goggles and being transported somewhere else that is like usually the last thing I want to do after spending a day in front of the computer. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's not something that I've experimented much with. I think the idea of, okay, well, maybe one day if you're just going to replace monitors, replace screens, and, rather than sitting in front of a bunch of monitors all day long, you're just going to have maybe a much more comfortable pair of goggles on, and you're going to be doing your work that way. I don't know, maybe you have some keyboard. The form factor for me, kind of like what you said, it doesn't feel right. Yeah, the metaverse, gosh, it really just does feel like a bit of a dinosaur of the ZERP era, kind of like, like NFTs. I mean, I know people are still making them and all those sorts of things, but or at least I think so. But yeah, it really does feel like a dinosaur of the ZERP era, and sure enough, that 80 billion probably could have been used on AI. I don't know. Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe they changed their name to some AI thing now, but but yeah, not too many deep thoughts from me on the metaverse. It's not something that I was super bullish on at the time, and sure enough, yeah, we've got a pretty big pivot.
Nick,
Yeah.
Nick, what do you think? Like, how do you think Meta's positioned right now? They did spend so much money. The morale must be quite low because they're also pretty significantly behind on the AI front. They spent a ton to acquire Alexander Wang. They haven't, I think they pushed out, I think it's Avocado. They pushed out their Avocado model.
Delayed, yeah.
What do you think's going on internally? And then what do you think like they have to do to actually get to Frontier? And by the way, it's harder to get to Frontier than I think most people thought. Even XAI wasn't able to necessarily do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, to that point, it feels like there are just a handful of people truly at the front, or companies truly at the frontier now, where it used to be 5, 6. It feels like that's consolidated quite a bit. But I think the phrase is saved by the bell, like, and the bell being AI. Like, if AI hadn't happened, I think they would have been in a world of hurt. But now they can pivot into something, reinvest in this new bet, and I think that actually saved them. Otherwise, this would have been kind of legacy damaging, and certainly would have hurt the company. And so, yeah, I think they're trying to figure out their identity right now. It's a lot of reorgs, as we've seen, a lot of acquisitions as well. And so I don't know. I think they're maybe scrambling a little bit, but I have no doubt that they will figure it out. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg has proved himself a number of times throughout history, and I can only imagine that he will rise to the occasion and make this work.
Yeah.
But Jayden, I want to go back to one thing quickly, and I want to get this on the record. Does Jayden Clark own an NFT? And if so, which one?
I don't own NFT. I actually don't own any crypto. It's funny. I think having done a stint at a hedge fund, it's made me so risk averse when it comes to public markets or anything along those lines. Like, I will happily like fling an angel check, like knowing that it's probably gonna like go to zero. But when it comes to anything, I don't know, more speculative, crypto, all those sorts of things, I've honestly not really touched it. Whether that philosophy pays off long term, I'm not too sure. But yeah, I was what was I? I mean, God, what was I even doing at the time? I mean, yeah, like, I don't know. I think I was just kind of like, I mean, I was still really just finishing college, but during the whole NFT boom. So yeah, it wasn't something that I was super across. Let's say that.
Yeah.
Disappointing answer.
I know.
I'm a little surprised to hear that, but I want to talk. Let me frame it from what they have going for them. Meta. They are still a founder-led company. Zuck still has super voting, majority voting shares, if I remember correctly, and he is more than willing to turn the entire tanker ship on a dime. Right? They've already invested a ton into building out their own data centers, a ton into hiring the best AI folks on the planet. Whether they can align and actually get a model out the door, that's still to be seen. But they have a cash printing business. It is incredibly popular, just as popular as ever, all of the social media sites that they have. And I think they have all the right ingredients. They have a ton of data. So they kind of have the right pieces. They have a little bit of a wedge in with the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, which I think are pretty interesting, and that they keep building in that direction. That'll be interesting. So it's a little bit of the AR, but they do have a lot of things going for them. Whether they'll be able to actually execute and get a frontier model out the door is to be seen. I hope they do, and I hope they open source it.
And they have Andrew Tulloch, another Australian.
Oh,
Just going
right.
to represent.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, Jayden, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. You are always welcome to come back. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, getting to hear about the San Francisco streets, as Nick said. So we'll have you back on.
I appreciate it. Always super fun. Thanks for having me.
All right, Jayden. See you
Thanks,
later.
Jayden.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really do hope Meta is gonna release something amazing. I am not holding my breath that it's gonna be open source, but I really do hope it is open source. And look, the more companies that are building frontier models, the better. Right now, it's really seeming like a race between Anthropic and OpenAI, with Google coming in a close third, second, if you know,
Yeah.
like, so we'll see. And really, I get the sense, and this is just outsider's perspective, it is really like the pre-training dictates your next 12 to 18 months of releases. If you have a great pre-train run, you're just going to have great releases one after another, and then you look like you're on the frontier. So it just
Right.
really takes one. I mean, this is like the hardest thing on planet Earth to get right, but you only need to do it once, and you're good for like a year.
Yeah. And we all know pole position in AI is briefly lived. One release can totally change the standings. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. By the way, last kind of comment on this, 80 billion is a brutal headline, but obviously Meta can absorb it, right? They have a very healthy ads business that's compounding, right? Like their core business never really faltered. So they can, of course, handle it. And it's more of just a headline at this point than anything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Very excited to bring on our next guest. So Microsoft has been building its own AI chips to support workloads across Azure, Copilot, and its partnership with OpenAI. And our next guest is the person running that program, Andrew Wall. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, nice to meet you both, and thanks for having me on.
Nice to meet you as well.
Hey, Andrew.
What's
Very
going on
nice to
today?
meet
How
you.
are you?
Doing well, thank you. It's been great to listen to the conversation. You guys actually touched on quite a few things that are near and dear to my heart, from the tokenomics conversation to I was actually in augmented reality when I joined Microsoft with HoloLens as well. So really covered the full spectrum there.
Oh, okay. Well, let's get your thought. I want to hear this. So if you've worked on augmented reality and you're seeing some of the headlines, obviously AR, VR didn't grip society as some had predicted. What do you think the state of AR, VR is right now?
I think it's really interesting, just how quickly things are changing. And I know we're going to talk about the AI landscape with most of our time today and how quickly things are changing there. But I think that, I agreed with a lot of the points that you all had, and Jayden as well. It's just interesting to see where that gets a foothold right now. And with the advances on productivity and product building on the AI side, it's hard to figure out how to prioritize those two things against one another.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, can you give us an overview of what you're doing at Microsoft? And we know you're helping, or you're leading the chip design, the chip manufacturing, but give us a little bit more clarity into what you're doing there.
Sure thing. Yeah, excited to talk about our internal Azure Maia program. I think this is something that we've been developing for a long time, but behind closed doors. And we were excited about our Maia 200 announcement just over the course of the past month or so. But Azure Maia, it's built on custom silicon. And I think you see a lot of competitors doing this as well with Google and AWS. But it's more than just the silicon. And what we're so excited about with Maia, similar to some of these other programs, is it's really about the vertical integration of the silicon with the system into the data center fabric, and then the software stack that you build on top of that. And so with our second generation program with Maia 200, we've really focused on making sure that we can get it right all the way from the AI workloads that run on the top of the platform to the models that run underneath those, and then making sure that the infrastructure that we're delivering can deliver the highest performance at the best efficiency.
So that vertical integration, is that important in most scenarios, most use cases, or are there just very specific things where that really is advantageous to have?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more and more important. And it's actually not dissimilar from the token conversation you guys were having previously in terms of, good tokens versus maybe less good tokens in terms of how many of these that you use. I think that as AI workloads continue to optimize themselves and figure out what they want to be when they grow up, and figuring out how we're going to use these agents in specific use cases, or some of these bigger flagship workloads, I think the vertical integration is going to become more and more important, because I think that as you start to understand what the workload needs and how they use the models underneath them, then it's about how the model is co-designed with the hardware infrastructure and the data center layer underneath that. And so I think that there's a feature element to it. And so what can one infrastructure deliver for a model or a workload that others can't? But there's also an efficiency element. So how do you make sure that you're maximizing the performance? How do you make sure that these tokens are as good and strong as possible for some of the pre-trained runs that you mentioned, but also the inference of those models after the fact? And so I think that as we're building Maia, and I think as other companies are building these fully integrated stacks, they're really starting to focus on the things that matter most for their workloads.
When you're thinking about building Maya, and then you think about the economics of it, is Microsoft planning to sell Maya chips to inference providers, or is this like, hey, we're just going to run it in-house and provide the inference ourselves? Like, how do you think about that?
It's starting as a platform play, and so when we think about the Microsoft AI platform, we want to make sure we're always delivering the best performance at the best cost to developers and customers. And so if you kind of bubble all the way up the stack, this means that for any customers and workloads that run on top of the platform, we need to make sure that they have not only flexibility to understand what infrastructure or models that they're running on underneath, but also that we have flexibility to be able to move those across infrastructure seamlessly. And so what Maia enables us to do is drop a new option alongside Nvidia GPUs, alongside AMD GPUs, and some of these more specialized accelerators like Cerebras in the future, and make sure that we have this option that sits kind of between the general purpose offerings and the more specialized offerings. And at the end of the day, what that means is that we can improve our inference tokenomics. And specifically, what we have with Maia 200 right now is the best perf per dollar option in the fleet. So that means we can generate more tokens per second at the same cost compared to any other accelerator that's running right now.
Is that a function of you building it yourself, or is that a function of the tech that's on the chip that allows it to be the highest perf per dollar?
Technology innovation is going to be super important regardless of the accelerator that's there. So when you see some of the things that Jensen announced this week at GTC, or you see some of the new AMD infrastructure that's going out, everyone is pushing to the latest technology innovations, and that's true of Maia as well. Specifically, the perf per dollar uplift that we're seeing is because we have brought that in-house, and we're combining the technology innovation that exists in the industry today with deep knowledge of what our workloads and our models need, so we can optimize for those in a way that's only capable when you drive this full vertical integration.
It seems like we have a situation where every major cloud provider, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, are all now building their own AI chips, right? And so I'm just curious, from more like a macro perspective, when all of the industry's biggest customers stop buying like the off the shelf and start creating their own hardware, what does that mean for the industry? Is that a net positive?
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting dynamics here, from supply chain all the way up to how we think about availability of different services and the workloads that run on top of them. I think it's net positive. And the reason I think that is because I think the more optionality that exists, the better. And this is true across the ecosystem, but it's also true within a single cloud as well. And so I think one of the unique differences that Microsoft is deploying in terms of how we're thinking about integrating Maia into the portfolio is we still want to make sure that we're offering the best third-party GPUs while also offering our in-house Maia accelerators. I think some of the splits that you see from Google and Amazon are slightly different, but we believe deeply in that diversity of supply and making sure that Maia is one of many options that can run the best customer workloads.
I mean, it's kind of been the Microsoft ethos for decades, right? Just work with everybody, provide all the optionality to our customers. So it seems like you're just following in that same vein. Can you talk to us a little bit about where you are in Maia production? Is it live? Like, what are the plans? How many megawatts, gigawatts do you plan on having running through these chips? Can you give us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I probably can't share all the internal details, but I'll do my best.
Oh,
I mean,
sure
you
you
guys
can.
can yell at me if it's not interesting enough. No, so Maya 200 is live today. It's in data centers. It's running workloads, which is awesome. We're going to continue scaling this through the end of this calendar year, and Maya 200 is only the second generation. And so, though we're relatively behind compared to some of our competitors, I know TPUs V7, V8, V9 start to see some of those things. Um, Amazon is running on Trainium 3 now. I know they've announced exciting things about Trainium 4. Maya 200 is only our second generation. So, we've been excited to be able to catch up compared to what our competitors have been able to do. I think our raw speeds and feeds are roughly in line, and we're delivering better perf per watt than some of the options that exist right now. But from a roadmap perspective, we are also working on our next generation family of products. So in parallel with Maya 200, we're already working on Maya 300. It's something that we'll be targeting for next calendar year, and then we go generation over generation from there.
Are there
And
specific
okay.
one last question on that, Nick. Are there specific types of models that work well or especially well on Maya chips?
There are, yeah. I think there's, okay, you're going to let me geek out a little bit. And again, tell me, like,
Please do.
More
get back
geeky
in the
the better.
lane.
Yeah.
It's interesting from my perspective to understand the different types of AI workloads that exist out there. I think we spent so much time thinking about just training versus inferencing, but really there's a full spectrum of things that are in between there in terms of post-training synthetic data that can run to help advantage the next generation models. And then you get into consumer and commercial inference and all the things that are going to be made possible with the agentic workflows of the future. Orthogonally, there's an axis of the types of infrastructure underneath those that power those workloads. And so you can have something that's very general purpose, like the NVIDIA GPUs of today, or something that's very specialized when you start to look at Cerebrus and Grok and some of those things that are designed for very specific use cases, whether it be low latency or otherwise. What we've tried to do with Maya is position ourselves right in between those and thread the needle in some ways. And so we want to make sure that we can provide enough general purpose capability that we can still run some of the future workloads that we might not understand well enough right now, while also making sure that we're advantaging the current workloads that matter so much to Microsoft. And the things that we're primarily focused on are the model building activities that the Microsoft Superintelligence team is driving under Mustafa, as well as some of the product cases that currently exist in foundries such as M365 and some of those workloads.
Can you actually talk about that relationship with Mustafa? Like, how does that partnership work day to day as you're developing these chips?
Yeah, Mustafa has been a huge proponent of the program, which has been really awesome. I think, I guess it was probably a year and a half ago or so where we had a broad set of strategic discussions to understand, hey, what do we want to do from a Maya perspective? And I think Satya was very, very clear, and Mustafa stepped up and said, hey, the superpower of Microsoft is we have the silicon in-house, we have the models in-house, we have the workloads in-house. Co-design is going to be extremely important as we drive this thing moving forward. And so what we've done is we've deeply integrated with Mustafa's team, and we work closely on a daily basis to make sure that we're driving this co-design between the infrastructure layer and the model layer. And on one hand, that helps us be more efficient in the things that we're designing for, because we know exactly what Mustafa and his team care about in terms of the infrastructure that we're building. And then on the other hand, it gives Mustafa an opportunity not to have to rely on general purpose offerings like NVIDIA and some of these things, and say, hey, these are the things that are really important for me. Go make these happen.
Does Microsoft have ambitions to be on the frontier with model releases like an OpenAI and Anthropic, Google? I mean, Microsoft, owns a piece of almost everything, so they're kind of well positioned. But do you can you talk a little bit about internal culture and that desire to be serving Microsoft branded native frontier models?
Yeah, I can't share too much in terms of specifics there, but I can tell you a little bit about how we're approaching it strategically. And Matt, I think this goes back to your point in terms of ensuring that we're providing the optionality while also giving ourselves an opportunity to level up in some ways by serving kind of the fully integrated one-piece stack. And so when you think about the models that currently exist on the Microsoft platform today, as you mentioned, we have a lot of OpenAI models that we serve. The Microsoft AI models are going to be something that we start to see more and more of. We have conversations with Anthropic as well. And so we want to make sure that we are able to serve a robust portfolio of the best models today. Now, when it comes to figuring out how to advantage those models, that's where the infrastructure layer comes in to say, okay, what do these models run best on, and how can we think about advantaging those things moving forward? And in the future, we can see a state where silicon to system to model to workload, we get advantage by running all of that stuff in-house.
So, Andrew, I want to go back to something you said about performance, because like you mentioned, this is only the second version, and yet it seems like you've caught up, meaningfully caught up. And actually, let me preface this by saying a large majority of our audience is fairly technical, but there's also a growing number of folks who are getting exposed to this for the first time. And so I'm hoping we can go back to basics here. Like, as you design these chips and try to extract more and more performance out of them, what is actually happening? Like, what are the steps that you and your team are taking to extract that performance?
Yeah, this is a fun area. Yeah. I'll give you the RTL.
You have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
No, well, maybe to really come back to the conversation you guys had earlier, because I think that's where it starts in terms of, good tokens and how you make sure that you're deploying as many good tokens as possible for whatever the workload looks like. I think from a tokenomics perspective, more tokens is generally better. Now, can those tokens be more efficient? Absolutely. Can we be more efficient with how we use those tokens? Absolutely. And so in both of those cases, though, more tokens is a good thing. And so when we're designing our infrastructure, there's kind of this tokens per second metric that we like to leverage when we start to see what is the performance that we're really capable of. And when we're running a model like OpenAI or one of the MAI models, how do we think about the latencies for running those models? How do we think about the number of tokens that are actually being produced as we drive throughput on these things? And that's when we start to understand what the things are that matters in the hardware underneath it. And this is where conventionally there are a couple capabilities or speeds and feeds on a piece of AI silicon that you can say would drive that output, whether it's your FLAPS performance on the compute side or your HBM bandwidth. But it's actually much more interesting to understand how data moves across the system. And when a developer makes a call to say, hey, I want to deploy this number of tokens, how does that call get, how does that call actually interface with the model? And how does that model deploy the hardware underneath itself to make sure that things are behaving in a way that it can be as efficient as possible? And so understanding that entire workflow is really key to understanding what the performance looks like on top of any individual piece of silicon or at the system layer or whatever that looks like. And by understanding the telemetry, we can then create a feedback loop where we can say, okay, we can project this performance. We can actually understand and model how different hardware architectures will benefit this in different ways. And again, the output is always making sure that we're improving the throughput or the tokens per second at the workload level.
Andrew, I'm curious, not specific to Microsoft, just the AI landscape in general. I am feeling like the best tokens, the good tokens, are getting more and more expensive. Now, we still have incredible capabilities that continue to get pushed down the stack, down the market, and they're getting cheaper and faster, more efficient. But if you want the best tokens, you're paying more than ever right now. Do you think that trend is going to continue? If so, why? And maybe if you don't agree, why also?
Yeah, well, you guys talked about proliferation a little bit, and I think that there's a really interesting trend that you can look back and observe with all of the models that have been deployed to date. And you start to see this kind of stair-stepping or even a seesaw in some ways, which is you have a new frontier model that's released for the capability like jumps out of the box. And it's like, oh, I can do things with this model that were not previously capable. But Matt, to your point, those tokens are like astronomically expensive compared to what they used to be. But then a secondary thing happens, which is also really interesting, which is then another model comes out that's either fine-tuned or driven to be more efficient. So you actually maintain the capability, but now the tokens are much more efficient, or you're reducing costs pretty significantly. I think the best case of this is DeepSeek in the past to see what they did, about a year ago in terms of really driving the efficiency up. And so I think you're going to continue to see that capability jump and then efficiency jump to make sure that we're driving that. And then with respect to the infrastructure underneath, you need to make sure that you can run both of those cases and make these stair function stair-step function jumps in terms of infrastructure efficiency as well. And by infrastructure efficiency, what I really mean is tokens per second per dollar. And the more that we can drive some of these innovations in the infrastructure layer, regardless of what's happening on the model side, we anticipate that costs will improve. And that's where Maia really comes into the portfolio. I mentioned this industry, or the portfolio leading perf per dollar. That will directly translate to customer value there as well.
And where do you think local inference comes in all of this? Like, I'm a pretty big believer that eventually we're going to have a hybrid inference approach where, the frontier still hosted in the cloud, kind of the workhorse models maybe hosted in the cloud, maybe hosted locally, and then certainly a lot of the kind of lower sophistication use cases can be run on edge devices. What's your take on that?
Yeah, we have a lot of smart people thinking about that exact problem. And Matt, I agree with you. I think hybrid is likely where we're going. I think that even for some of the models deployed today, a lot of these things run in the cloud, but in time, they will be available locally as well. However, I think there's always going to be this use case for things that are able to run in the cloud and able to run in the cloud more efficiently. And that's where I think cloud scale infrastructure and making sure that we're flexible and integrating this diversity of supply is going to be important for these use cases moving forward.
Yeah. Andrew, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. I really can't wait to see Maia as it continues to get deployed, and hopefully there's enough tokens in the world for my use cases. Because
oh, absolutely, yeah, it's
been
been great talking to you guys, and appreciate the questions on all this, and we're super excited about Maia moving forward.
All right, thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
So, Matt, I mean, the real question becomes: everyone's building their own chip, forward future chip.
That would be sick. I don't know if we have enough expertise on the team because we have zero. So I think maybe we'll just rely on the big companies to actually build the chips, and we'll just use all the tokens.
We'll reconsider in 2027.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
we're a media company.
Hey, it doesn't hurt to have some custom chips lying around. But I think we should move on to our next guest, who is the founder of Eliza Labs and creator of Eliza OS, the most widely used open source framework for building autonomous agents. Shaw Walters, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? How you guys doing?
Hey, well. Yeah, very, very good. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah,
how you doing today?
I've been grinding, so I'm a little tired, but I'm just in it. We're shipping a big project this weekend and just building.
Do you want to talk about the project?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we are making an autonomous agent with kind of like a waifu aesthetic. Like Grok has kind of Annie. We thought it'd be. I've done a lot of this kind of stuff in the past. I thought it'd be very interesting to have something that was the mix of the sort of fun, silly companion, as well as all of the capability of something like an OpenClaw, basically. And yeah, so it's called Milady. We're launching that right now.
Of course,
yeah. Yeah.
So actually, on that point, it seems like Eliza Labs has a lot of offerings, a lot of surface area. For those who might not be familiar, can you just give us the quick overview?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of operate like a startup studio where we have a few different people leading a few different ideas. And this is all basically proliferating like our core idea, which is that we have an open source agent framework. We've been doing this for a couple of years, but like we kind of blew up last year. So that main thing that agent framework allows you to do is build things like games, experiences, different kinds of applications, autonomous agents that are, the full-fledged, like it's running around on your computer kind of thing. And so the key thing on top of Eliza is I've been building this Milady project as like, what is a full autonomous agent that's like a consumer would use that, and then kind of taking that and thinking like, what would my mom use? Because OpenClaw is cool, but it's a little complicated to set up, and there's a few things that we would do differently for different kinds of communities. So we've been really thinking about like how could we reskin these things for your community, for your project, or whatever your thing is. So if you're like into crypto, then it's like, oh, it comes with wallets and polymarket integration and all these kinds of things. If you're more into like gamer stuff, we're really working on like agents for games and stuff like that. So we have Eliza, we have a game called Babylon, which we're also launching this weekend, led by Punkar, who's one of my teammates. And that's a game so that you have an agent, like you have our Milady agent, you have an OpenClaw, and you ask, well, okay, cool, I have this cool agent. What can it do? Well, it can play these games. And these games are like right now, Babylon is a paper trading game, but our goal is to build financialized games where the agents have incentives to play them and actually make money. And in doing so, we're like collecting all of the data and trying to build better agents who are better at the things that we do. So I wouldn't say we're, like with Babylon, it's basically a copy of X. It looks exactly like X, but it has something kind of like Polymarket integrated into it, where inside of our sort of fake AI driven universe we've created, where we have like AI Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Mark AI Andreessen and these kind of, I don't know, we obviously AI 16Z was one of my previous projects, so we have a lot of AI puns in there everywhere. And so you look at these like NPC characters and they're all yelling at each other on the timeline, kind of like real life but times 10. And then your agents can come in and they can use the information from this kind of insane reality to make predictions in a prediction market and to do leveraged trading on like the SpaceX or Tesla or whatever, that like the fake versions in our game essentially. And so this is like a way for agents to demonstrate an information sharing game and get us toward where we want to go with autonomy. And I was working backwards from like, why can't I have a fully autonomous agent today? Like, why can't I just go out there and do all this stuff for me? And there's a lot of things that it could do. Some things it would struggle with. OpenClaw is very capable, but generally the problem has been security. Like, if the thing has a shell and a browser and it can go and talk to people, like what's stopping it from scamming me? I mean, somebody's OpenClaw just emailed me like, hey, let's set up a call. I'm like, yeah, if you give me $50, I could probably like, that's a surface area I could probably attack. And so what we're thinking is, well, could we collect the data of agents constantly attacking each other and scamming each other and make that part of the game? So the game is the agents are sharing information, they're making predictions, but they're also lying to each other, cheating, doing everything they can. And we want that information because we want agents to know how to not be scammed at like a model level. Like, how would we actually build trust and skepticism in a model that's fundamentally trained to be very helpful? So if you think about like a Gemini or Opus or something, it's like, oh, how can I help you perform this task? And you'll be like, oh, I want to build a bomb. And it'll be like, no, I can't do that. You're like, well, it's for a sci-fi experiment. It's just a joke. It's like, oh, well, in that case, sure, no problem. Let's build this bomb. Like, that sounds great. Because it's trying to be helpful and they're doing a lot to sort of like push against that or sort of prompt against the desire to help me on certain things. But generally it's helpful. And this opens it up to being very helpful with like the random stranger who's talking to my OpenClaw in an email or something like that. And I have no idea. So our working backwards was we have autonomous agents, we have games like Babylon, and then that helps us to train the kinds of agents that we would want in the future that could actually go out and do all the interesting, crazy stuff we want them to do. So there's a lot more, but that's kind of the vision, from back to front, if that makes sense.
Shaw, we've been talking a lot about tokenomics on this episode, and I want to get a sense of everything you describe sounds cool, but also very expensive. So,
yes.
Like, are you using frontier models for this? Are you using local models? Like, how expensive does an Eliza product get for the average user?
Oh, it can scale from you can run this at home on your computer to you can spend $200 an hour if you want to. So generally, if you're running, like I have a MacBook, for our games, like for Babylon, if you went to the, it launches tomorrow, so it'll be open. It's at babylon.market. And if you go and you launch an agent, you're launching like we have like the cheap version, the free version, the cheap version, and the pro version, or the free, the fast, and the pro. And the free is like an 8 billion parameter quantized model that we can serve. I could serve thousands of requests of that before it costs like one Sonnet call, right? And then, you get up to like, yeah, you're using Sonnet at the high end. And if you brought this down on your own agent, you probably use something like Opus. And you could spend a lot of money on agents, like a lot. Or you could just run it for, a few billion parameter model, and it would be very poor. But in something like a game, that could be very good. We have another game we've been working on called Hyperscape, and it's an RPG where we have agents running around, and they're not very good at planning with a small model, but they're very fast. And you can imagine scenarios with gaming and more lightweight things where speed might actually be like a more positive quality than just outright like performance. And these small models can be like really, really cheap. but generally we have I'd say I have an algorithm, which is like why did OpenAI buy OpenClaw? And it's like, well, they wanted they want to make autonomous agents. And in order to do that, they have to collect a certain kind of data. So what are they trying to do? What's the outcome? They want autonomous agents. What data do they need to collect? Autonomous agents doing autonomous things. And then how do they get people to pay for it? This is the key thing. Well, we're all paying like $600 a month for 3 codec subscriptions now to run these things. So, that's a pretty good SaaS model. The way that we do it is more like degenerate gambling. Same thing. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to build autonomous agents that cannot be scammed, that are like good in social environments, that can interact with other people I do not know. How do I collect the data? We make a game basically that simulates that part and incentivizes specifically the behavior we're looking for, which is agents scamming each other. And then how do we pay for it? Well, gambling and degeneracy, of course. And so if you're playing any of our games, like we with Hyperscape, for example, you can actually bet on the outcomes of models dueling each other. That it's like a streamed polymarket kind of experience. With Babylon, your agents can go in and they can be like making money and playing the game. As I said, currently paper trading, but when we move it to crypto, it'll be full on. You can just like have your agents make money while you sleep, or lose all your money while you sleep if that's what you're into.
Sure. So these games are acting as a training environment, obviously. Yeah. What are the indicators that they're ready to move out of the training environment and into the real world? What kind of margin error are you looking at?
Well, so I mean, this is definitely like a challenge. Generally, in the same problem in like, oh, I have this cool simulator with this robot in it, and then I have this real robot, and I want the robot to like walk around. But the real robot has like physics and constraints that the simulation does not. And so this is called the sim to real gap. And it's the same thing. We have these agents in this software environment that are walking around doing stuff. And we can show like by any metric, if I train, I take a 30 billion parameter model or like a 14 billion parameter Qwen 3, and I take data from our thing and I fine tune it, it definitely gets better, right? It definitely gets better because it's getting a lot of data about what to call when, but it doesn't necessarily become like a smarter reasoning model, right? It's not like I've given it some kind of implicit, new generalized knowledge. I've just really like trained it on my use case. And so for a use case, like if you have basically any kind of training harness and you're building in use case and you're like training on that and putting it back in, you are going to see definite and immediate positive return, like, upward gradient of like, this thing is doing better on all of my benchmarks and in my game. But then if I were to take that out and put it back onto like normal benchmarks, you would see no difference and probably worse, right? Like it may actually make it worse because fine tuning is essentially collapsing the space of capability to make it better at a certain narrow set of tasks. For video games, this is maybe even desirable. But once we get into the real world, obviously we want to be able to take this data and show it back into the real world. But in order to do that, you're going to have to like, have quite a lot of data variance. So in like our game, we're creating a game to demonstrate this, but probably to do like a generalized approach, you'd need to run the GPUs pretty hot. Like you'd need like DeepMind level, like we're going to run a lot of these at the same time with a lot of variance in the scenario, because that would be the problem. Is if like I have a game where everyone's doing the same thing, then I might be like, I can't just like take all of that data and put it into the DeepMind mix, so to speak, of like a foundation model, right? Like it would have to be mixed in somewhat. But what we're trying to do is one, like prove that this even that this all works at a deeper level, not just that like, okay, it's better at our game, but that it's better generally at like not being scammed. And so we've been also working in parallel on a thing called Scam Bench, which is just like a bunch of scenarios of like real world. We've seen a lot of people trying to scam robots kind of thing. And so like if we have this and we have our different games, like there is probably a nice mix of data that could be added to your training mix where you could have this be like very real world. But that's like our longer vision, because like as we all want local compute. Obviously, like agents want to move to the edge, compute wants to move into your pocket. This is the long-term thing. But the short term is probably very much like we're still going and working with large labs and like ultimately the problem that we're trying to solve is one that I think that they'll be very, very interested in. And so it's like, if we can prove this at the simulation level, we can build it out. But like, yeah, there's a big sim to real gap. I wouldn't say like, oh, you can just use our data and put it in and suddenly your agent's smarter. It's like, it'd be disingenuous not to acknowledge that it's a lot harder than that, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So real quick, just to interrupt, we have a lot of technical folks watching the show, but we also have some people who are getting exposed to this for the first time. Like, if you were to explain this to somebody who is not on the inside of the inside, like what are you building?
All of AI has basically built on games since the beginning, especially like the robot side of AI. And we are building agents that can play games, but the games are simulating real world stuff that we would want. So not just any random game, but like a real world version of X, as we're looking at it right here, with a real world version of, like with a polymarket attached. But then, and it looks to the agent just like X and polymarket, but we are controlling and pulling all the strings in the back end. So it's an environment for agents to improve, but it's also a fun game that you can spend your money on and ideally help us to amortize the costs of training, essentially.
So you will continue to create new games to train the agents in, but at some point you do have to release the agents into a real environment, and that's really where the risk comes from. So I guess I'm curious, like what is your appetite for risk? Like, what are the benchmarks that the agents have to reach for you to say, okay, it's time?
Well, yeah, I mean, my appetite for risk can be much, much higher because the actual thing that they're doing has a very low risk. Like, if your agent loses all your points, like, sorry, dude, or it does something stupid in the game, like, that's the game. Like, that's why we're there. It's a really good thing that's like not your actual treasury or wallet or like all of your actual money. And so I think that there's definitely a scaling where, like, I'm in the very financialized part of agents, where a lot of people ask us for agents that can trade and manage your money and do polymarket and things that I think are like pretty LARPy still. And they're LARPy not because you can't imagine an agent could be really good at this in the future, but because, like, if it messes up 1 out of 10 times, it's like, sorry, you've lost everything. And so until we've solved these deeper problems, so I'd say it's like, I think people are trying to jump to the end, like the end state of this, and say, oh, agents are done. Look, OpenClaw. I've added, payment rails and security for the OpenClaw, so now it can't do this. But you cannot build an autonomous agent and like, you can't, like, if you give it like a browser and the ability to write code and do stuff, there's no guardrails that you can possibly build. They have to be in the model, right? Because if it can jump out onto the internet and write its own code, like, there's no sandbox or like requirement of pressing a button or anything I could do. It would have to just be able to be secure and safe on its own. So I'd say my risk threshold for that is like, how much money am I giving it? If it's just a silly bot running around the internet, I have a very high risk appetite. If it's got any amount of ability to do financial things or real decision making on my life, or like interacting with people I know and could be very embarrassing, then I think we have a long road. Like, I do not think this is something that we're just going to crack in 6 months. I've been working on this for 5 years, since, like, when GPT-2 came out, we were like, this is definitely going to be the future. And then GPT-3, that was like, wow, that was 2021. And every year it's been like, oh, next year it's just going to be it's all going to be done. And I think we just have to be very aware that, like, in an exponential growth thing, you still don't know exactly when that like runaway improvement happens. And so, like, we should be fine just messing around in video game land for a while. Like, John Carmack is building a robot that plays Atari right now. Like, we've got the time to get this right.
So something I think about quite a bit is what needs to be rebuilt on the internet to facilitate better agent use. You talked about browser use, which in my opinion is basically broken right now. It doesn't really work all that well. Like, what parts of the internet stack do you think are going to be rebuilt first for agents? And then what do you think people aren't looking at right now that also need to be rebuilt, but maybe are overlooked?
I tend to think that there's I'm definitely in a world where a lot of the people around us are like, hey, let's build payment networks for agents and all of these things. And I am of the very contrarian view that the whole selling proposition of agents is that they can use the human stuff, that they can use our human tech. And yeah, like, they're pretty bumbling right now on the browser stuff. Although I use it a lot now for like for browser automation and testing, and like if I build something, like go through and test it. And it's gotten so much better in the last year that like I think we have to look at the like what is the vector of this this technology. Like, is it like, oh, I should build a bunch of training wheels and things to help these agents that are kind of dumb? Or should I just assume in 5 years they're going to be crazy smart and really good, and that all of this is probably going to go away, and that we're going to take the training wheels off? And I really don't think that anything that's like training wheels technology is going to make it. So like do we really need dedicated payment rails for agents, or can they just use like Stripe or crypto or whatever? Like, do we really need something new, or can they just use what I already use? And like, do they really need new ways to chat with each other, or can they just use literally any communication platform that's ever been invented? Like they can write their own TCP application. Like they can, like they could write their own like ICQ or AOL Instant Messenger in 2 minutes if they want to. So why would they like use my thing or pay for my thing? And generally any middleman SaaS, like why would agents use it when there's probably a free version or free way for them to communicate and transact? And so I think a lot of I generally think that agents are just going to adapt faster to the human world than like the internet's going to adapt to agents. And I think that's the world we want to live in. Like, I still want to live in a human world. I still want to live in a world where like I can browse the internet. And if everything becomes these like agentic pipelines that eschews that, then like we're not even going to know what's going on. And I really, really think that like the selling proposition of LLM agents and LLMs and robots and stuff is to have them like use our world. And it's like, if we're talking about a door, should robots have their own doors, or should we just give them hands so that they can open our doors?
Shaw, I think that's an interesting point. The maybe the counter to that is changing the physical world is incredibly difficult. So of course we want to build robots that are humanoid form factor that can operate the same way that humans do. But for bits, for the internet, it's much easier to change. And so I'm trying, like, to me, especially, and I want to get your opinion on this, as we continue to see an increase in the amount of AI generated content on the internet, it's going to be increasingly difficult as a human to go browse the internet as we know it today. And so our agents probably will have to filter it, browse on our behalf, bring us back what we think we're going to want to see. And so you mentioned like, hey, I want to go browse the internet. Do you really see that as the future? Do you, or is it probably more likely going to be your agent browsing on your behalf and bringing you back what you want to see?
Probably a combination of the things. Like, obviously there's a class of video games that I would rather play than like have played for me. And I'd say that probably hits like touches on all technology. Now, I would agree with you that there is something fundamental, like there's a topological shift in the internet coming, which is inevitable because of what you said, which is like the AI slop thing, that the technology that enables us to have these cool agents also is flooding the traditional internet with like AI generated slop. And I don't know if it's a solvable problem if you're just going to do the same like hub and spoke centralization. However, if we all have agents and we all have servers, then we can build like this is the thing that I'm really thinking a lot about, but it might be hard to explain, is like the topology right now is hub and spoke. So we all go send our data to X and it sends it to who it thinks it should be sent to. But we could also have like a topology, like a connections between us that looks more like a small world where like, you know, someone who knows someone who knows someone, and your data could actually travel to the people who would want to see that data from you. So if you're like into metaverse and you post something about metaverse, like that could go to your 3 friends who still care about metaverse. And then it wouldn't go to everybody else. They would never even see it. And like, how do you decide who it goes to? Well, your agent sends it to the people who it knows you are connected to, who would want to see. Those agents get that data. They send it to who they would want to see. This looks like word of mouth and small world graph. And we haven't done this before because it's not a very efficient network in terms of like, like, okay, well, we don't all have servers, but in a world where people have like running live agents, everyone has a server that can receive messages live. And this is like fundamentally different than the internet that we had before, where like we just don't have any way to like hold our own state or like, have our own agent, so to speak. And yeah, like when you talk about, well, what would X look like if I had my own algorithm or my own client? It would look like an agent. It would be and it would do that thing you're saying, like, show me the top 10 bangers, show me the 5 new models that came out this week. And you're probably right. Like in the same way that I use ChatGPT over Google for searching, I use it because I just ask it the question. Probably the same thing. I'm going to ask ChatGPT for like my social feed, and it can also generate user interfaces now, right? Like we've seen a lot of this new thing where if I'm like, show me the feed or show it to me as a messenger application, like that also would be pretty tenable. So I'm with you that like I think the value of agents is that they're going to adapt faster to the internet than the internet's going to change, or like the basic coordination problems of shifting in like what standards would we use to make the agentic web. Like we could argue for that for 30 years, but by then the agents will already be using the web. I'd say that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And one last question for you from me on this topic. As you think about agents and if they are tasked with filtering everything on my behalf, we're putting a lot of trust in that agent. Now, obviously, right now we're putting a lot of trust in, as you said, the hub of the hub and spoke, the X algorithm, the Facebook algorithm, Instagram algorithm. But like, are there increased risks, or is it just the same risk and somebody else is holding on to it? Like, how do you think about that risk transfer of being kind of the primary filter between me and the information?
Well, I mean, like I'm right now we're having a conversation and I am the primary filter of some amount of information that I have that you don't, you know, in theory. And so I'm like telling it to you right now. Now imagine that we were just two agents and I was telling it to you. Like, well, the risks could be the things of like your agent be like, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Now give me your social security card. Like there could be that kind of very dumb, obvious like security risk. There could be the like very unintended consequences of like, wow, now we have this open social graph and like, you know, foreign intelligence agencies are using it for something I can't even imagine or something. But I think generally, like we've already given away all of our data. Like there's not much more you can know about me that I could like put out there than you couldn't kind of Google. I'm getting like right now I'm getting a ton of my wife especially has been getting attacked a lot by people stealing our identity. We've both had our identity stolen in leaks in the last 3 weeks. So like we're already in the dystopia. I think that it can't get much worse in terms of a lot of those things. Like you could probably just go find my social security number on a black market website now. So at this point, like the cat's out of the bag. X hired KYC people who, you know, were like actively banning people and blackmailing them for their accounts and stuff. I could point to a lot of reasons why it's already very broken. I don't know if you know my story, but I was actually banned from X for open source software and had to settle with them in order to get back on. And it was
tell that story.
Well, I mean, I signed a settlement, but essentially we sued them. So we made an open source framework that was very popular last year. And because a lot of people used it to put their agents on X, they banned me because one of our plugins did kind of basically what the OpenClaw plugin did. They were a lot nicer to the OpenClaw guy. They deleted everything of ours and all of our accounts and banned our open source links and everything. And then we had to pay them $1 million to get back on, no questions asked, for absolutely nothing in return. It was just like crime is legal in America, and that's how it works now. So, you know, that's the alternative. And like, so I have my own mission of like, I would love to live in a world where I can have a voice without it being taken away from somebody arbitrarily. But more than that, like they are banning everyone with bots because they don't know what to do. And it's very obvious that they're like X is not going to survive none of the social medias that are feed based, that are attention based, are going to be able to survive the fact that like millions of bots are going to flood it with spam. Almost every reply to everything I post on X is an agent now. And Nikita is like losing his shit on this. And I'm telling you, there's no way to win because as you said, you're going to have to run like the top level grok on every single message from every user to be like, is this a spammer? Hugely expensive. You know, I'm very skeptical. I think that we need a new topology and that's going to come through the agent stuff.
Interesting. So I actually want to go back to the problem that you are directly solving. It seems like you have put a lot of thought into security and being very careful about how you're rolling out all of this technology. Not everyone takes that approach. You know, we have a lot of momentum in the AI industry. It's a freight train of momentum. What do you think the answer is for combating some of the risks? Like, are you a person who looks to regulation as a potential solution? Bernie Sanders is one of those people who has been very outspoken about this. Or Where do you land on this, and
No,
what is the solution?
the risk to me is definitely more on the side of regulatory capture and on stupid things happening, like having to KYC my computer or like in order to use it, or having to deal with some crazy Nvidia regulation so that I can just run a freaking model. Like if I want to go train a model right now, I can just do that. And like, you can't stop me. It's my way, it's my code. Now, what happens if that starts to demonstrate some levels of super intelligence? Do you just get to come and take that from me, or like, am I not allowed to distribute that? So probably I'm not going to create super intelligence on my computer because I just don't have the GPUs. And so a lot of this like argument of regulation, regulatory capture, blah, 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 mostly is like between the big guys and then things like the ad agency wondering what's going to happen and how they're not going to lose all their money. So they're just doing stupid stuff like lobbying directly against our incentive, like our what any of us would want for this KYC bullshit. And so in this world, like, I guess what can I do? I really want to be part of the open source part of this. I really think it's important that we all have access to this. Everything we're building is open source, and like part of that is so that people can come and join us and just like build with us and get into this world. And part of it is just like a fundamental belief that like if we're just building another thing, if we're building this beautiful technology that gives value to all of us, that in theory hoarding it is actually just hurting everybody and preventing like you and me from having the cures for cancer sooner. And that just seems like deeply amoral. And we could get it. That's a whole view on itself. But like inside of this, we don't have an open source DeepSeek in America. We're all using Chinese models now. Like everything I've told you, we're training on Quen models. Like, that's crazy to me. Why are we doing that? Why is America not the leader in open source models today? That's insane. We absolutely should be. So I think the risk here is losing our freedoms to stupid people with incentives like, oh no, my advertising business is going away. I think that's like the number one risk, is people clutching their pearls and making the world objectively worse for the rest of us. Number two risk is like, oh no, this technology is too dangerous. We can't trust our citizens to use it. And then I'd say like number three is like, well, great, we should now automate the mass surveillance of everyone at scale that they can't even possibly fathom. And I mean, if I had unlimited Anthropic budget and access to the NSA records, like I can make infinite money doing infinite things that you probably wouldn't want me to do. And I think that's a terrible incentive for anyone to have, like absolutely terrible. And so, yeah, like if the only solution I can see is to give everybody else the same superpowers. So I would say I'm accelerationist for sure. And I would say that I think that the risks here are of going slower, not faster. But then inside of that, I am surrounded by people who say really stupid things like, oh, your AI agents can trade meme coins. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great way to lose all your money in like a day if you want to. And so like, where's this balance between people saying totally just unbelievably stupid, unrealistic things? Because the industry, you can just say anything like, hey, I've got a Mac Mini that's like doing my personal assistant now. Come on, guys, that runs at 1/10 the speed of my Claude Sonnet. Like that would never be able to do anything useful for me. It's totally a LARP. So I'm in that world of like surrounded by LARPers, but also like there is a clear and urgent need for this stuff. So somewhere there's a middle ground here, if that makes sense,
Absolutely. Shaw, we could talk about this for a long time, but I have to let you go for now. Thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciate it. You can find him at Shaw Makes Magic on X, at Eliza OS on X, and ElizaOS.ai. Shaw, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Shaw.
Absolutely. Good chat.
He went on a heater there at the end.
Yeah.
So much to dig into there.
Yeah, there was a lot. And I kind of agree with a lot of what he said.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be interesting if it's like your AI versus my AI. If everybody has the same AI, then it's really going to be a function of how much compute you can push through the model, and or how much compute you can push through training a better AI, and then it's whoever has the most capital wins, right? And then you start to get into the whole permanent underclass issue. So, okay, we won't go too far down that rabbit hole in this moment. We have another amazing guest to bring on the show, Nick.
Yes, we sure do. Final guest, a returning one, Himanshu Tyagi, back to talk about open source, AGI, and of course, the launch of Arena. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, great to be back.
Yeah. How you doing today?
Good to see you.
Doing well, doing well. Just moved out of Middle East for some time, right in time, and yeah, doing well otherwise.
Everything you safe? You in a bunker? Where are you at?
All safe. It's such a coincidence. I just coincidentally moved out a few hours before the thing started, and it was the last flight out of Dubai. I didn't know it's gonna happen. It was just me
Good
being
for you.
lucky.
Yeah. Well, let's actually start with maybe the most obvious question. Sentient recently announced Arena. So tell us a little bit about what's going on there. I know the first cohort launched, I think, earlier this month too. So what is it? What's the goal? Give us the lowdown.
Yeah, so this is the next phase of AI, now what everybody calls evolution, in the sense that the next wave of AI is coming through tools like Claude Code, and which is taking and I saw that, Matthew, I saw that you have been using Claude Code aggressively. So the idea is that now the era of data which is over the internet is done. That kind of data is done. And the next evolution and the next kind of AI which is being built is through what you ask these kind of harnesses to build, what they build and what comes out of those. That's the next era of AI. The problem is that everything that's happening there is behind the scenes. And even open source models can't really help you there, because even if somebody builds an open source model based app, the whole data that you use to describe your issue and to give feedback on your code and to drive that code in a certain direction is still closed. And our goal is to bring those ideas to open. Our goal is to, in some sense, get other open source harnesses to compete with Claude Code's amazing harness and see where the gap is. So not only having models in open, but having that whole evolution of a piece of software or an agent being in open. And that's the arena. This is the arena where different agent builder harnesses compete to build better agents.
Himanshu, can you talk a little bit about the state of open source harnesses? I've started to play around with open code. Obviously, I'm quite deep in Cursor. I'm quite deep in Claude Code, in Codex. I think I've heard some good things about Pi, but tell me, like, what's your take? It feels like building an open source agentic harness is easier than building an open source frontier model. But you tell me, what's the state of open source harnesses right now?
They're behind, to say the least. And that's because of close coupling between the models and these harnesses. Claude Code is great because the model itself was trained on how the Claude Code structures its code, how it writes the MD file, how it does the markdown that feeds back into the model, and that's great performance. I think I think this is the gap we want to close. We want to give enough data for open harnesses, generate enough data in open to allow open source models to be trained. Frankly, open source models are quite behind right now in terms of that whole experience, uh, uh, especially with an effective harness. You should tell me about your experience with other open harnesses.
Yeah, so I haven't played around with it a ton, but I've done a decent amount in open code. And
Hmm.
it has a lot of features, but I've only plugged in open source models into it. And as you said, open source models, especially frontier coding models, they're not quite competitive with what we see from the frontier labs, right? So um, it's been good. I need to do more testing. I just got a monster of a machine with the DGX station, and I want to load the biggest possible coding model onto it, and that's how I'll kind of do that comparison. But you're right. They're not there yet. And at the end of the day, if we're talking about ease, if we're talking about how capable the model is, even price, I'm going to Opus. I'm going to GPT-5.4. It's just easier right now. Yeah, that's my take on it as of now. I hope it changes though.
Yeah. Yeah, so the point is, what can make a difference here, right? And is it just the model? And so we see, and everybody sees. It's not just we. It's now sort of the talk of the town, talk of city, especially in SF. Everybody's talking about evolution. The idea is that there are multiple parts to it. One is the most important part is how do you give feedback? You give feedback as a human. That's very good. You say, okay, do this. This is the issue. Take a look at this. Fix this. That's one part. But you can go to town with it. You can give you can guide these models in a very sharp way, and which can help you reduce the context and give better feedback. And then second part is how do you react to that feedback, which is nothing to do with the model. Well, it's something to do with the model. I'll come to that, but it's about now how do you generate possible solutions to fix that issue or to improve your code. These are the two parts of it. Giving feedback can have human experts, can have this LLMS judge, can have all kind of verifiers. And reacting to the feedback is what the model does, the proposal that it comes back with. And then there are these other frameworks which people are building, famously JEPA and Optimize Anything. And we have built something called EvoSkill, which is a skill evolution framework, which reacts to that thing. I think my belief is that almost all frontier open models with appropriate feedback will give reasonable output in these algorithms. And it's just that you have to explore a bit more, maybe to get to the right solution, but they do propose good solutions. And the point is the point is, how do you get the perfect solution for your problem? How do you sort of maintain that list of good solutions, then evolve and get the right solution? So it will come down to efficiency, but I think they have the core knowledge in them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Karpathy's auto research project gave a lot of inspiration to like, okay, wait, he can auto research his way into a GPT-2 level model. Why can't we do that to skills? And why can't we fine tune models like that? Why can't we change all the prompts and auto research our own prompts? And it's kind of interesting, but I think at the top level, you still need a frontier closed source model to orchestrate and to come up with the experiments, right? You're not using an open source model to do that, or do you see that happening soon?
I think for those experiments, open source models won't be behind. What you have to work out is how do you use the output of the open source model. As I said, these frontier open models do propose good solutions, but how do you navigate this set of solutions and choose the perfect one for you? And the second part is, what do you give as input to that model? Because one option is you give everything, you give the whole code as input and say, now you improve it. And this is the issues I'm facing. That's just too much context to handle. And a harness like Claude Code helps you focus on the right thing. And that the track that it effectively puts is very good. So I feel it's not so much behind. People have not done enough work on it. And this is the next thing that should happen. And that's where Arena is. Arena wants to generate enough open data to bring out where things are behind, how these open models are reacting, how these open harnesses are reacting to this kind of feedback on improving different problems. We chose a specific benchmark for the first Arena. We chose something called Office QA, which is a interesting benchmark. Databricks had put it up, and it's a benchmark which people use to test on enterprise use cases, calculating numbers, reading documents, and doing some kind of analysis on those things, and automatically coming up with agents and skill to do that. Essentially a dev shop agent for small enterprise use cases. That's what we chose. Quite excited about it. We're getting good attention.
Yeah. So what are the initial results? Can you share any progress that's being made?
Oh, so the first cohort has been selected. No progress yet. This first one closes first week of April. What we have done is we have put up our own evolution harness, which we called EvoSkill, which generates these agentic skills automatically in response to what it sees as performance of an agent from this harness. Just like Karpathy's framework. Karpathy's framework is very focused on a very specific kind of problem. What we have done is you have this eval running in a harness like Harbor. You send your query, you get some responses, then you respond to it by creating new skills automatically. You don't create one, you create multiple in response to different things. And then along the way, you keep the best ones and sort of come to the enhanced agent automatically to sort of benchmarks the eval. That harness, when set up on Opus does very well with Claude Code. That harness, when set up on other things like Open Hands and other open model, does not do so well. But we are hoping that other builders who are joining that cohort can push that and get it to the level of Claude Code's performance. That's the whole hope of this arena. And the entire data and the entire feedback that we and experts will give will be kept in open.
As you think about how agents discover skills, do you think things like Evo skill are going to be useful? And do you think that agents are going to just create their own skills, or do you think discoverability is still going to be a thing? Does there need to be a central repository of skills that agents can search across, or is like, are we going to have maybe this is like the bitter lesson, but agents basically will just do everything themselves. They'll just write their own skills for everything. I mean, me personally, before you answer, I'm like, I have never installed a Claw Hub skill. Never. I just say build the thing, and it does that in like just a few minutes. So like, where do you see discoverability versus self evolution, self creation?
That's a beautiful question, actually. So firstly, I'm sure we are all scared of those skills sitting there and picking it up from there. But it depends on how much data you have. You as a human expert, right? You have this extraordinary ability to give very sharp feedback about the essence of the problem, and then the code, the harness can react to it and give you a great skill. But now if you're not sitting there and this thing is running on its own in response to evals, and if you have a very large eval, then in principle you can discover a great skill. But if you have very few data points and there's no human to support, then you would rather, this is our take on it, you would rather adopt an existing skill equivalent of where you pick up a skill and maybe modify something a little bit there and adopt that one rather than generating upfront. So if you have a lot of data, large eval like Office QA, then you can generate a skill which is useful for you. If you have limited data, you would rather adopt a skill. And if you have human expert feedback giver like yourself who can give the essence of the problem as a feedback, then you can also generate skill with very single input. So it depends on what the feedback mechanism is. That's why I think the feedback, the signal to that thing is the most important point here. How you give feedback to your harness is the most important point. That will determine what kind of algorithm you can use for evolution.
Okay. Makes sense. So we were just talking to Shah, our previous guest, about the progress that the industry as a whole is making with agents. And he made the argument that the models themselves will advance enough to solve a lot of the roadblocks and barriers that agents are currently running into, instead of worrying about the infrastructure, setting up the payment rails, doing all of these kinds of things. Where do you align on that kind of debate? Will the models solve a lot of these issues themselves just by, as they innovate and get more sophisticated, more performant?
Can you say a bit more on what kind of issues you're talking about?
So, when you're using a browser-based agent and it runs into a commerce issue, not being able to make a payment, for instance, you can set up the rails to make that payment process smoother. Or, to Shah's point, you wait for the model itself to become more sophisticated, and it can just figure out that problem on its own. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So this is an interesting point. This point basically relates to what is the next wave of data. So models are not learning from vacuum, right? Models are learning from the next wave of data. And a mainstream application like payments, with enough logs being thrown back and enough people trying to build payment applications on Claude Code, maybe I buy that. It's possible. Something very side bespoke like what people are, let's say, doing in physics. Maybe not enough data, maybe all in silos and one or two data points, and hard to believe a model will by itself start solving it. Definitely we know this is the year of world models. Right? Definitely we know that long-term planning and long-term things models are not capable of doing very good work at. So if you have multi-step instructions and you have to decide to buy the cheapest tickets, cheapest travel plan by coordinating across multiple websites, and requires, let's say, 10, 20 steps, it will be very hard for models to plan that way. for planning your family trip. Maybe and for a large family like mine, maybe very hard to plan for models to that way. Multi-step planning may be harder. Definitely, robotic planning is very hard for LLM. They can't do it. That's too much.
Yeah.
And so it depends on the kind of problem. I do believe that this payment interaction are so mainstream. So and data is maybe openly available. At least for Web3 payments, data will be openly available. That can be solved. So it depends on data and the sort of the how mainstream the application is.
So I think if I can just pull on that thread a little bit more, how much of the internet do you think needs to change to accommodate agent use versus do you think the agent is just going to get better and the web can stay the same, primarily piloted by humans?
Oh, yeah, I don't know how you feel about it. Last 3 months have been a bit crazy, right? This answer would have been different, maybe milder
Yeah.
in October, say, or something. Now I think internet as we know it is gone. Right? I think we are this. Nobody wants to build any front end for anything. Everything should be as we
CLI.
need it when we need it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Nobody wants that, right? Like it's like internet is the word dark web is taken, but dark in the sense that it's just the backend, and whatever you need is generated then and there. I think it has to change completely, and also the era of good information over the internet is gone. Too much junk is coming there. Yeah, I think internet is changing completely. I don't know. We will the interfaces that we use to consume the internet must have great summarizers, must have great filters, and must have UI as and when I need it, right? It's fixed rigid UI. So I think it will change a lot.
Well, Himanshu, I'm really excited to see Sentient Arena. Because like I really want these harnesses to get better. I really especially want open harnesses to get better. So I really appreciate the work you're doing. I want to thank you for coming on the show. Check them out on X, HS Tyagi on X, at Senta Boreal on X, and sentient.xyz. And Himanshu, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for.
And that is our show. I want to thank our guests, R. Andrew Wall, General Manager of Azure Maia at Microsoft, Shaw Walters, founder of Eliza Labs, Himanshu Tyagi, co-founder of Sentient. Nick, once again,
And
thank
of
you
course,
so much.
our friend Jayden. Can't forget Jayden.
Oh, of course. Yes, sorry. And of course, our friend Jayden, who will be back on the show soon enough. And Nick, thank you for co-hosting. Thanks to everybody who watched. Go follow us on Twitter if you don't already do that. Give us a like, give us a subscribe at Forward Future, and go check out our newsletter, our newly designed website and newsletter, forwardfuture.ai, and we will see you next time.